A man tried a ding-dong ditch to get me to open the door and presumably rob me. By U/Power Pack M. This happened about 10 years ago. So at this time, I'm 14 years old and a male, and I'm enrolled in high school. My mom worked at a nearby apartment complex as a manager, so she'd pick me up from school at 2:40 and bring me home instead of riding the bus for hours. The day is completely normal so far. She picks me up from school and then brings me home. But not more than 10 minutes after I'm home, a black car pulls up in the driveway and I hear a hard knock on the door. I look through the glass on the front door and I can clearly see a man wearing a hoodie in the summer laying on the ground in front of my door. I guess he assumed that he was completely obscured because my mom had a wreath on the door and the space between the window and the bottom of the door was wide enough that someone could probably assume that I couldn't see them. Well, I saw him. I ran and grabbed the house phone and called the police from the kitchen where I could see the car. I had a machete. Well, I was a teenager that thought swords and stuff were cool, so don't judge me. And I waited around the corner of the door while still on the phone with the police. At this point, the man knocks again, so I took matters into my own hands. I yell as loud as I can, "Leave now, or I will kill you!" I had a pretty deep voice for my age, so I guess he thought that I was a full-grown man because this man got up and hauled ass like an Olympic sprinter. So about 3 minutes or so pass, and the police get to my house. We had no cameras or anything, so there's really nothing to go off to pursue this person. The cops pretty much just tell me that I handled the situation well and the laws about self-defense. And the man never returned. I look back on this a lot over the years, and this man almost certainly wanted to rob us. What's most creepy about this to me is that he most likely scoped us out, saw that we were just a teenage boy and a single mother, went through the trouble of learning our routines, and waited for what we thought was the ideal moment to rob us. We bought a handgun because of this, so I never really lost any sleep over this because I knew that if he came back, that I had a surprise for him too. So, shitty burglar, let's not meet. I opened up the door to a robber by U/Lwdwig. This kind of mess-ups always happen in the worst situations. I get nervous, act stupidly, and the world blesses me with mercy. This time around I was at home, pretty unusual for me. The last days I had been sick and stayed home from school, and that Friday I was fully recovered, but decided to skip class anyways because it was the end of the week and it just wasn't worth the trip. Little background, both of my parents were out. My father had late shifts, and my mother was taking care of an elder, so she had to sleep at her house. We have wooden slabs that close on the windows and doors for the heavy weather, and are also closed at night for avoiding people to look inside through the curtains that are very transparent, especially at night when the only light source is inside the house. My parents used to open them when they were home during the day to make the environment naturally illuminated. But I spent all day in my room like a goblin, so I never did. The only one opened was the one that my parents left open for getting out of the house. And this is an important detail. I was starting to notice a gray car parked across the road on specific times of the day. They simply parked, stayed a while, and then drove off. I figured that it must have been some of my neighbor's visitors, since they didn't have a place for more cars, so sometimes their friends park on the bus stop. One day, I was cutting myself some tomatoes for a sandwich when I heard a loud bang at the glass door. I quickly turned at where the sound was coming and spotted a man that was throwing himself against the door with his whole body weight. I tell you, that door isn't made to hold any kind of trauma. It was a full panel of glass, as fragile as it may sound. Many people broke it by mistake during parties, and I was totally sure looking at the shaky nails that it wouldn't have lasted another 2 bangs. My mind at this point dropped to a caveman level. I decided to open the door with a knife in my hand, a rounded table knife. The man fell before my feet and I collected myself with the most efficient expression that I could give. I didn't say a word and I just stared at him as he quickly got up and backed off. He then proceeded to make up the messiest explanations that I have ever heard. He said something like, "Oh, I didn't know you were home," and then asked me if my parents were home because he had a service for sharpening knives. That's a thing around here that people go around the streets and stop home by home for various services. He then looked quickly at my hand and responded himself that we didn't need any sharpening and that he had made a mistake. I then saw a woman coming out of the corner and following him to come into the house before noticing me. The man turned and shook his head, seriously, eyes wide open. She backed off too and they ran at the car, from which unfortunately, I didn't take the plate. Honestly, I don't even think I could have seen it from that far. I then closed the wooden slabs, shut the door, and proceeded eating an unfinished sandwich with shaking hands. My house was broken into on Christmas Eve by you/Gwenny Lou. This happened in 2019 and I was in my second year of college and living in a townhome about a 10-minute walk from campus. I lived with 2 other girls, but at that time, they were all back at their parents' house for the holiday. I work in healthcare and I was working Christmas this year. A little bit of a backstory though. There used to be 4 of us living there, but one girl had to move out due to issues with her boyfriend. He was a jackass who abused our kindness on allowing him to stay there. He was only supposed to come every so often, but basically ended up living there. We told her that she needed to kick him out after an incident with him one night, after he got physical with her and verbally abusive with the rest of us. She wouldn't listen, and we told her that we would have to talk to the landlord then. A long story short, she ended up moving out and left on bad terms with us. At this point, it was affecting everyone and we didn't feel safe with him there, so she moved out. Okay, back to the story. It was Christmas Eve and I worked the next day, so I was getting ready for bed. I locked the doors, turned the lights off, and went downstairs where my bedroom was. I was scrolling on TikTok for about an hour when I heard what sounded like the chairs in the kitchen move. I thought maybe I was hearing the neighbors next door as we share the same walls, and sometimes they can be a bit loud. But then I remembered one of them texting me and asking me to bring in a package that they were expecting while they were all gone at home. But the noise was short-lived, and so I just brushed it off. But the next thing I know, my bedroom door is being opened slowly. In this moment, I get a flashback and remember when my second grade teacher was telling us about the time someone broke into her house, and she acted as if she were asleep, so that if they were there to rob her, they wouldn't feel the need to hurt her if she saw them. But my freaking phone is lighting up my scared jaw-dropped face, so I can't act like I'm asleep. Where I'm laying in bed, it faces directly to the door, so we're just looking right at each other. So there I was, laying in my bed, shitting myself, while this guy has 1 foot in my bedroom with the door cracked open. It felt like an eternity, but in reality, it was probably more like 10 seconds of us looking at one another. He slowly takes his foot out and closes my door. I sit there just in complete and utter shock. I couldn't make out what he looked like as my eyes were adjusting to the dark again from the phone screen, and all I could see was a backwards baseball cap. I knew that I had to call the police, but my anxious ass knew that if I called, it would alert my parents' phones that I called. Well, me being dumb as hell was like, well, I don't want to make them worry. Also, I was scared he might still be somewhere in the house, and I didn't know what he would do if he heard me call. So, I text the guy that I was seeing at that time and tell him, some random guy just broke into my house and came to my room. He snapped me out of it and told me to call the police, and so I did. The dispatcher asked me if I felt comfortable enough to go and lock the front door for them so that they didn't have to break it down, and I told her no way and that I don't care if the door is broken. I am not going up there alone. A couple minutes later, I see flashlights shining through my window. I hear the police knocking at the door and announcing themselves. They got in and asked me where I was, and I came out of my room and they came and got me. They told me to wait out on the back porch while 2 of them searched the house and 1 stayed with me. It was like the shit you see in the movies where they have their guns drawn and they turn the corner with their partner and everything. But they didn't find anyone, and I said nothing looked like it had been taken. They even tried to get fingerprints, but they were unsuccessful. Then, they started asking me questions and informed me that the back door was unlocked and had no signs that it had been broken. But I told them that I locked it. Luckily, the guy I was talking to stayed with me that night, but I still couldn't sleep. I kept having to go check every inch of the house over and over, and I placed chairs under the door handles and on the front door and back door, and also in my bedroom. The next day, I informed our landlord, but she refused to come out and change the locks, and she never ended up changing them for the rest of the time that we lived there. Every time that I go to bed now, I triple check all the doors if they have been locked. It doesn't matter where I am. I have a dog now, and he helps my anxiety of intruders, as well as a recent purchase of a Ring doorbell. I believe it was our old roommate's boyfriend. I think they may have made an extra key for him because he was basically living there. But I don't understand why he didn't do anything to me, the house, or our belongings. If it were some random, I don't know why they wouldn't have done what they intended, and that could be many different possibilities. I don't know what their intentions were that night, but To the man who broke into my house on Christmas Eve, let's not meet again. Prowler by u/no_association 844. I've experienced the same prowler on my property 7 times. I've called the police every time, and I have seen him 3 times. He's tall, dressed in dark clothing, and wears a ski mask. His MO is to make his presence known by throwing rocks on the roof and looking in windows wearing a ski mask. Most incidents have occurred on the weekend between 10 p.m. to 1 a.m., with the exception of a Thursday at around 6 p.m. The first time I saw him was in my sliding glass door in the back of the house. He unscrewed an outdoor floodlight, and he doesn't run away when spotted or yelled at through the windows. On one occasion, he returned after I called the police and they had left the property. I called the police again and they were able to track his footsteps around my home, including walking on an adobe wall. The police believe it's a neighbor that retreats to a hiding spot, probably around the open space and informal trail behind my house, or runs back to his home to hide and return later. The first incident occurred in December. However, I think he has been stalking my home since the end of November. The most recent incident was several weeks ago. The prowler returned. I heard thuds on the roof at around 12 a.m. and I called 911. And this morning, I found rocks on the roof, around 20 of them. This is the 8th incident that I am aware of, because before, I dismissed loud thuds on the roof and unusual sounds coming from around the house early on. I've implemented security measures, including installing a surveillance system and acquiring firearms. But the security cameras do not seem to scare him off. He has avoided them or allowed himself to be partially seen hiding behind bushes and trees. I'm concerned that this behavior will escalate, and I hope that it doesn't come to a confrontation, but it definitely is possible. I escaped an intruder by playing along. By u/loud and proud. In 2014, I moved to England from Canada to gain work and travel experience, and also to find myself. I ended up living in Essex with 3 other roommates. They were all women, all a bit older than I was. I was 24 at that time, Megan was 31, Cherry was 34, and Cassie was 38. Megan was from New York, Cherry from New Jersey, and Cassie from Poland. All 4 of us shared this 3-story flat. The back of our home was the living room and kitchen, and the back wall was complete glass that looked out into the garden, and the garden was completely fenced in. The house had an interesting dynamic, to say the least. Tons of stories from that time in my life. I adored all of my roommates. Well, except for Cherry. After living with Cherry for 7 months, I was over her antics. One day, I come home from work and I lock the door, make myself something to eat, and then go up to bed. I brought some work home with me, so I am in my nightie with all these papers around me and my headphones on, jamming out. I had headphones on because Cherry was out to dinner with work friends. That meant booze, and then soon after that, a tantrum was surely to come. I just didn't want to have to listen to her crazy scream crying. I am working away completely focused until I feel something. I look up to see a man standing over me. I don't register it right away and passively say, "Cherry's room is on the second floor." And then I continue to work. Cherry regularly brought strange men home. He doesn't leave though. Again I say, "Cherry's room is downstairs, you..." He then interrupts and says, "I'm not here for Cherry." A cold chill iced my veins, and my fight or flight kicked in just then. I start surveying the situation. I look him up and down, and he has a bottle of Prosecco in one hand and a knife in the other. He is about 5'10", wild, muddy brown hair and black eyes. He has a light blue polo shirt on, and one side of his collar is popped up, and a distinct Manchester accent. Once I focused in, I realized his eyes were black because his pupils were completely dilated. Shit, I was in trouble. I needed an escape plan. Unfortunately, this man is standing in between me and my bedroom door. I needed to get downstairs, but I needed for him to think that it was his idea. So, I decided to play along. Just then, he uses his knife to pop the cork. Prosecco started flowing onto my carpet. I said, "Oh no, let's clean that up. I prefer to drink out of proper flute anyways." He nodded, replying, "Yeah, you're a proper classy bird. Let's go." I try to act as natural as possible. I try not to show that I am shaking all over and try to gain control over my breathing. We take the long journey down to the main floor of my flat. All 3 floors. He has the back of my nightie bunched up in one hand, and I could feel the point of the knife graze my back with the other. I was trying to playfully speak with him as we walked down the stairs. I couldn't tell you what I was saying. I was most likely rambling and I couldn't hear anything over my heart beating in my ears. We get to the bottom of the stairs, and there is a hallway to my left that leads to the front door. On my right, which is much closer to us, is the kitchen and the living room. We make our way into the kitchen and I point to the cabinets that had the wine glasses. He said that he knew where they were and start towards them. I now had the kitchen table in between us, and it was time to run. I burst into a sprint down the hallway towards the door. My hands fumble over the lock, shaking and sweating, and I swing open the door and see 2 men walking across the street. They must have been walking home from the train. There was a big train station in front of our home. I call out to them for help, and suddenly, I am flung onto the ground. Little pebbles piercing my skin sent sharp pains where they jab. The intruder pushed me out of the way to run and escape, and one of the men chased after the intruder, while the others said for me to go inside while he surveyed my home and to call the police. I lock the doors and I call the police, and while I'm on the phone with dispatch, I manically run around the house to double-check all the windows and doors. Suddenly, I hear a loud bang on my door. I inform the dispatch of the banging, and she informs me that the police weren't there yet. I thought it might be one of the gentlemen who helped me, so I go to look out of the eye hole. And it's him, the intruder. He came back. He's banging on my door, screaming that I had his glasses and that he was not done with me. I absolutely freak out. The dispatcher attempts to calm me down, but I am losing my ever-loving mind. She then said, "They are pulling on your street now. You should hear the sirens." And I did. Thank God. The intruder then blasts off, and one officer jumps out of the passenger's side while the car is still moving and chases after him. The second officer comes into my house, interviews me and the 2 gentlemen, collects the evidence, and takes photos. After some time of him being pushed there, Cherry comes home and freaks out. Once the situation was explained to her, she said, "Oh my God, that could have been me." "Yeah, thanks, Cherry. It's all about you." The next morning, I am called in to identify a man that they had in custody, and I pointed him out. I got into a little room and the officer pulls out an evidence bag and he asked me if the items were mine. And they were. There were my underwear and photos taken from my home. The officer informed me that the intruder had been stalking me for some time now. He estimates around 3 months. He had made a nest outside of our home on top of a hill that overlooked into our living room and kitchen. He is a known sex offender and drug dealer. And he then told me how lucky I was to get out practically unharmed, because the others weren't so lucky. So to the man who stalked me and broke into my home, let's not meet again. However, I would love to run into those 2 gentlemen again, and every day I am thankful for them. Were they going to break in? By u/Baffo Metaphor. Please, excuse any mistakes or if this is unclear. I'm stressed out and emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausted from the stress of my husband needing emergency surgery, and words are hard right now. This happened minutes ago. It's 2:16 a.m., and it is worth noting that I am a very small woman, just over 5 foot and about 120 pounds. It's also worth noting that people frequently think that I'm in my teens, despite being much older than that. My husband, P, is in the emergency room right now, waiting to be transferred to a hospital. He called me and asked if I could pick him up, as they didn't know when his room would be available. I parked my car out front of our house in the street. There's no driveway nor garages in this neighborhood. So, I walked out with my purse and keys and got in, and then realized, oh, I forgot P's cigarettes. I bet he would want them. So, I unlocked the car and went in to grab them. Upon returning to my car, I saw a light coming up the street towards me, kind of slowly, and I got this immediate thought of, get in and lock the door and don't move. So I did just that. A car with one headlight pulls up so slowly next to me that I thought they would stop and try to talk to me, sending me into a mild suspicion. I saw the silhouette of the driver turn to look as they crept past me. They very slowly made a right turn, and my gut said, "Do not move," and so I stayed. As they pulled away, I noticed that they had no license plates. Seconds later, they had circled the block and came to a slow crawl up behind me again and stopped at the stop sign. I am a corner house and the stop sign is behind where my car is parked. They stay for a few seconds, and then they went straight. I still didn't move. Something felt sketchy. They turned around in the cul-de-sac and stopped at the stop sign that faces the one behind me. They continued to sit there, and I could see them staring at my car, but still, I couldn't see their face, just a silhouette. I decided to call my husband, and he, sounding much more awake now, told me, "Get out and run! Get in the house and lock the deadbolt and get my pistol." I started to open my driver's side door, and the car pulled forward a little faster than before. I pulled the door closed and locked again, and told P what happened. He told me not to hang up and to get my ass in that house stat. I climbed over the console and got out the passenger side door and ran up to the door, fumbling my keys in the lock, but I managed to get it open. The car with a missing headlight was creeping ever so gingerly toward my house. And keep in mind, they're only across the street, so they were really close. But I got inside and locked the door, and I looked out the window to the side of the door and saw them speed out of there. They didn't come back as far as I could tell, but I had the curtains drawn, so I'm not positive. I got the feeling that they were waiting for me to drive away so that they could break in. Or so maybe they could follow me? Or perhaps I'm just paranoid and they were just lost. But my gut feels that they weren't innocently looking for something. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.